Bots and cons, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tech Talk, the officially unofficial Transformers TCG Podcast. I'm joined as always by Scott of Vector Sigma. And Scott, were you confused because I changed up the intro this time?
A little bit.
A little bit. I got to throw people off every once in a blue moon. I've been debating, trying, initially I thought when we first started doing this, maybe if I come up with something cute every time, and then I spent more than 5 seconds thinking about it and said, yeah, that's way too much to try and come up with it every week. Even for something silly.
You're on brand in articles because you can use it there. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, it's true. It's good for consistency's sake. Which, there is something to be said for that, but every once in a while you got to mix it up. It's good to keep things fresh. Speaking of keeping things fresh, we're going to have some cool new stuff to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic segue. I worked on that one for the last 10 seconds that I've been talking and was hoping that when I got to the end of the sentence, I could pull it together.
You're good.
But anyway, so we do actually have a whole bunch of cool stuff to talk about. Some of it's going to be just real cursory because we don't know a whole lot, but I think anybody who's listening to this, especially by the time this goes live, is probably going to know what we're talking about. And in fact, may have more information. So this is, as I've often heard WTF and TFW say it, it's a sealed envelope discussion where maybe by the time this goes live, we'll have a whole bunch of information that makes us look foolish, but it is what it is. So,
wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we seem to have that timing, which is, well, what are you going to do? For the stuff that we do actually know about, though, real quick, there were a few news items that had come up outside of the major stuff. One of the things was the lead designer Matt Smith had put up an article up on Facebook describing the Devastator deck, which just released this past Friday, or at the time this goes live 2 Fridays ago. It's pretty interesting to see the design process behind the scenes. A lot of it made sense to me as to the way they were going with it and how they wanted it to play both from the perspective of, I guess, from a competitive side, but also just as a boxed set. Did you get the chance to take a look at this, Scott?
Yeah, they talked a lot about, I guess, the 6-man team, I think, was pretty much the main focus of it, I would think.
Right. Yeah, and how that worked everything.
Yeah, and trying to, making sure you get value out of it and out of your guys and, what that changes to dynamics of gameplay and stuff like that. So,
right.
It's nothing that, it's good to see it, explicitly stated, I guess you could say, but it's definitely echoes what I've seen out of it in play thus far. Absolutely,
yeah. One of the interesting things I think was actually in the comments where someone had asked how come we didn't get a mechanic that removed counters, and Matt Smith actually replied with kind of what you'd expect, that didn't want to make it too complicated initially. They obviously had those ideas on the drawing board, but then it ended up getting pulled back, and maybe we'll see something like that going forward. Plus, it wasn't really on theme. The Constructicons are, constructing things, and as he put it, the demolishing they're doing is supposed to be your opponent.
Yeah.
So that was one of the other things that had caught my eye from there. But moving on from there, one of the other things that came up was a more recent rules roundup, which compared to some of the previous ones, we did have a couple more interesting things in it. There are 2 that I wanted to call attention to, but was there anything specifically that you saw, Scott, that you wanted to bring up before we dive into them?
No, I don't remember being particularly long, so...
Yeah,
I know what you're going to talk about, the best of 3 thing, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's one of them. The only other one was for, and I'm trying to find the exact wording, so it's whether you can, if you Optimus Prime Battlefield Legends swing in, flip a green pip, can you activate it and then also green it back to your hand? And the answer is yes.
That's no different than, playing any action. Is it still part of the combat pile? It's the same exactly.
Right. There was, from various events, I've heard people debating about it, not vigorously, but to some extent. So it was good to have clarification there. And like I said, all the other ones outside of the best 2 of 3 one were kind of what you'd expect. So that's why I wanted to call attention to it. The best 2 of 3 one, though, for those who are not familiar, this is basically the question was, when you're playing best 2 of 3, how do you figure out who goes first in games 2 and 3? The obvious official answer is there aren't official rules for it, but the recommendation is that the loser of the previous game chooses who goes first the next game. I know a lot of areas were defaulting to, I guess, the original starter rules where it's just alternate inherently. So do you feel this changes anything significantly for you, Scott? I mean, this is kind of how other games operate.
I mean, this is how we were playing it in the beginning, and then we switched to the alternate, which I'm not really sure why. Like, I understand like that's what the starter rules said, but like starter rules basically say that because they're trying to teach somebody how to play a card game, period, and they're basically just saying same person can't go first all the time because it's boring that way. Like, I mean, that's all they were really trying to say in the starter rules, but outside of anything else, that's what some people defaulted to. So that's what we had been going with. But I mean, this is the way I would have thought it should be anyway. So
and I agree with you. It was weird, to be honest with you, that the way the starter rules had it set up to begin with, because if the assumption is you're not in a structured, rigid setting such as a tournament, well, who cares? You just ask the person, do you want to go first this game or should I go first this game? You know what I mean?
Yeah, most rules say randomly determine who goes first. That's the way most rules say. But this is aimed at our audience that is even not at that level, so I'm not surprised.
I mean, yeah, it's not a problem to include it. It just kind of surprised me as opposed to defaulting to alternating in the beginning, or having somebody choose like this in the beginning. But it's good to have it cleared up. Again, similar to the Optimus Prime ruling, so it is officially out there now. But again, it's not. It even says it's not the official rule, so we'll see what people adopt. I'm assuming most areas are going to go this route because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So those were the two, I guess. I don't want to say, they're back.
He just came to yell at me for some reason.
He's very upset. Or he wanted to get his 2 cents in on best 2 of 3.
It's the other one, though, that usually isn't as vocal. So.
Oh, okay. So those were I don't want to call them lesser news items because that implies that they're not as important, but I think some of the more exciting ones are the ones we're going to get into. So one of the things that literally came up today, not long before we were recording, so I was scrambling to get everything set up, was we got the remaining 3 characters from the upcoming Megatron versus Bumblebee starter. That's Starscream, Megatron, and Bumblebee himself. So, Scott, you and I were talking about this offline a bit. I'm not super excited about these guys. Anything positive you want to add to these guys, or are you in the same boat?
I mean, these are definitely starter cards. I'll give you that much.
That is very true. There's not a whole lot of text to be had.
The only use I can see of any of them, honestly, is if you want to back up Starscream to one of the other ones to be able to run Null Ray, similar to the way that, like, in the 3 Wide Optimus that I ran the starter Optimus to have a backup for the Ion Blaster. Right. Honestly, I never had 2 Ion Blasters in play at the same time, but at least I had a target for it if I drew it late. Again, strategically, I don't think any of this stuff is a big deal anymore. Which is something we can get into at another time. Like, I think it's just best to play the best cards you possibly can and use them when it's appropriate. And you can there's numerous ways to get rid of them right now, like especially through green. Yeah,
you're generally not limited as we were before.
Yeah, but I mean, these stats are
lacking,
clearly worse than other options at their star cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the Starscream, for example, is just a flat worse Silverbolt, for example.
Yeah, I'm very. I mean, I get, like you said, they're starter cards, but at the same time, they don't have to be that much of a gap. I don't think. Unless
the starter game to a normal game would be very jarring for someone.
That was literally the word I was going to say. Yeah.
So
it's a thing. So I guess
your 7-drop is this Megatron, and you get Barrage. Like,
yeah, you're gonna feel
fair to me.
That's gonna be an awkward, unfortunate game there. I guess the point in their corner, the hope, the light at the end of the tunnel is that not long after this, we will be getting some additional cards. So maybe there's some other synergy, like you said, that there's a hypothetical Null Ray out there that you'll want to include these cards for, or to somehow fill in star gaps, I guess. It's notable that Starscream is melee on both sides as a plane. We've only had Ramjet prior to this. I have a
and Ramjet was only on one side, I think, right?
Yeah, he was ranged on his bot side. So I mean, it's fine. It's cool that they're mixing that in, but at the same time, I don't know if like that's not compelling enough for me. The Megatron ability, it's cool that he has actual text on both bot and alt mode, but okay, so he's a 4 attack. Like, okay.
Sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big issue. It's not even all the time. I guess it's, I don't know. There's just not a lot going for them at this stage. Maybe as we get further in. It doesn't appear that there are going to be there's been no mention of unique battle cards in the starter. So it's just probably stuff we've already seen plus these character cards.
Yeah, the only thing to note is that all the characters together add up to 24, so there may be like a star card in the starter as well.
Right, which would also be interesting to introduce because that's, I think, a mechanic that's a step beyond what I would have expected to be in a starter, but it would be a welcome addition if that's the case.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I'll add for this, and then we can move on to other stuff, is that when we were talking about this offline, I could potentially see one of the starter cards, whether it's one of these 3 or the Windblade, essentially accidentally being playable. And by that I mean that similar to how Starter Bumblebee or Starter Optimus Prime have wormed their way into decks, and believe me, I feel that those are stronger than these. Whoops. I'm knocking over some of my props for later. So, similar to how those ended up in a few different builds, I could see maybe one of these making their way into something. I can't picture the orange tank deck yet, but I guess if you had this Megatron Demolisher thing and you wanted them all to be tanks, and like there's a lot of ifs, but I guess maybe I'm trying to reach for something so it's not just, oh yeah, these are garbage, let's move on.
I mean, they're just a starter package. That's what they're there for. So
exactly. So I guess we can kind of leave it at that, but those are coming up. PR revealed those earlier today. Well, a couple of days ago by the time this goes live. So I can see there's already a few people, or I saw a few people already. I think Wassy already has a video up for it. The man's fast.
If nothing else, he's fast.
So that, I think, does it for the starter reveal. So let's move on to this other big thing that got announced this week on probably the worst possible day that they could have announced it.
Yes.
We were joking about that the other day, a few other people, and I'm sure everybody did this, because I know I tweeted at them, and there were a number of other people that did as well, or reached out to the media team through various channels of, okay, are you actually joking? I don't know what the drive was to announce it on April Fool's Day, but even when you say no fooling on there, I'm going to be skeptical just from having trained myself over the years with the internet. So, did you buy this right away, Scott, or did you think it was a joke?
I bought it right away because I had additional information. So
okay. So yeah, I looked at it and I'm like, I don't know about this yet. I'll wait and see. And then they've obviously supported it. It's not a joke. So for those of you out there, audio listeners or people, I guess, that have been under a giant metal rock somewhere on Cybertron, we're going to be getting a release day event plus a promo card. We're going to be getting in-play store support, and we are going to be getting the full breadth of the reveal for all of this, well, when this goes live, because as we said, that's just the way the timing always works. Oh, and by the way, Wave 3 in June of this year. Just throwing that out there.
And in addition, the Wizard Play store, the Wizard Play Network, had an article for stores to be able to sign up to get, I believe they said it was 25 unique character cards, and then like gold foiled versions of Wave 1 and 2 character cards to give out. Essentially how they want to, which I assume there would be like tournaments or kits, like the way other stores have done it in the past. Which is I believe a corollary to this, not necessarily like that. I don't think that's purely the in-store support, but like a corollary to that.
I think that's the way I interpret it as well. So I'm looking at the WPN right now. For those unfamiliar with it, it's the Wizards Play Network. It's basically where stores can go get information, as well as get their events posted, as well as in cases like this, get product to help support events in their physical locations. So in this particular case, if you sign up and you go through whatever's required for it, it's 25 copies of a character card not found in booster packs. So I'm very curious to see what exactly that means. Like, is it literally a totally different character? Is it a character with alt art? I feel like they would say it's alt art if that were the case. 15 sets of 3 character cards, 1 each from waves 1, 2, and 3 with special gold foiling like Scott was describing. And then 2 wave 3 posters. Obviously, all of this is with the intent of helping you launch or run a launch party. So a launch event, a pre-release or release day event, whatever you want to call it, as well as stuff beyond that. So it's really awesome, especially since so many people have been clamoring in one way, shape, or form for exactly this, something to help stores get butts in seats.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with WPN, but I just hope it's better run than other. I assume it's better run than other kit-based companies where, like, basically players buy the kits for themselves, and it just becomes a huge issue. So I assume it's better run than that, where you actually have to show that you're actually doing things.
Yeah, I believe that, and don't quote me on this because I'm not sure. I'm sure somebody out there will be able to tell us who's more into the scene, but I believe all of the local Magic events, so your F&M level things, as opposed to a Grand Prix or something at that level, are run through this. And then that way, and it doesn't necessarily, I don't believe it has to be a store, but to your point, you do have to have a place that you're running things. So it's not necessarily like you own a gaming store. It's like, well, if you run your events at a Barnes & Noble, or, you know, you rent a hall or something like that, I believe that's the case. But again, don't quote me on that one.
Yeah, I just hope, I think it's more strict than other companies where you can just, like, order the kit, quote, you know, like, and don't actually do anything with it. So
right. So we're going to be getting a whole lot of information probably 10 minutes after this goes live officially on April the 8th. And
it'll be later than that.
Well, yes. Yeah. That would be what, like 5 a.m. for them or something?
Yeah, I already have issues reaching out to them at that time in the morning as it is.
So. Yeah. So we'll so by our next show we'll have more to discuss about this, because there's, other than it being a thing, there's not enough information to really have any kind of worthwhile conversation at this stage. Unless you had something else you wanted to bring up.
No, I don't like the tinfoil hat too much. I mean, I'm very excited by the news. I will say a couple general things because they've just been on my mind. One, for our faithful listeners, I have reached out to contacts both at Wizards and at other locations that would be involved in some of this stuff, for lack of a better term. So we're hoping that we can get some additional guests in the near future to either talk about what's going to be announced on the 8th, or additional things that may be announced that were only hinted at as part of the announcement. I guess everything was pretty much hinted at as part of the announcement.
Yeah.
So I am trying to secure some guests for us as well. So I have some, it's more just a timing thing. My contact said, yes, I will come on when I can. You know, it's just a timing thing.
Everybody's busy. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I was going to say,
it's when they can announce things, basically.
That too. That's also going to be a big piece of it, because a lot of it is, you know, you have to get everything in the appropriate row in line. So that, I guess that does bring up one thing. If you don't hear from us for a little while, that may be why. As we're trying to, last time we had to record everything offline, so that may be something that comes up. Just to give everybody a heads up, we're obviously not going anywhere. So, any other thoughts? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
There's just been, I think there's just been, I guess we just reached a critical mass where every single announcement, one way or the other, is going to get, let's see, I talked to somebody offline about this, and they made a good point where they basically said, we've reached a critical mass of people where you're going to get, we're reaching what I like to call a Goldilocks moment. Mm-hmm. The majority of vocal people are only satisfied if it's not too hot and it's not too cold. Mm-hmm. And so if it doesn't 100% suit their idea of what they wanted, they become a vocal member of the minority complainers.
right?
Because it's the internet. So I would just say that, like, just remember whatever happens, like, it's probably not going to satisfy your 100% vision of what you wanted, but it's all going to be a positive step in the right direction.
Right.
There was a lot of time in between waves 1 and wave 2, and whatever that scheduling time is can only be seen as a positive of the game, that it's obviously moving to a more rapid time frame. Like, I don't have any information, but I would assume this is going to be later in June, for example,
right.
When it gets released. And it's a positive thing if there is this much large-scale product to move and ideas getting pushed out the door more rapidly than they were the first time from Wave 1 to Rise of the Combiner. So I would just look at it in a positive way.
Absolutely. I don't think there's really much to take away that's negative about that. And I think I know where you're going with it. That I guess at the end of the day, even if you assume that whether it's how the organized play or how the sets release or how whatever the new thing that we're going to discuss is, that if it's 80% of what you want, that's better than the 0% you had prior. I guess is one of the best ways to look at it. Plus, as you said, to your point, that if you're getting both more rapid releases and more regimented releases. So if we're now moving into the era of more, and again, we don't know this, neither of us have any information, and nothing's officially been said at the time of this recording, but if we're moving into a more regimented, Magic-focused or oriented release schedule with, quarterly or at least whatever I'm not sure exactly what their release schedule is now, but it's clearly more frequent than, twice a year that we were kind of looking at before. It's only going to be a positive overall.
Yeah, because that means there's enough. Honestly, it's because there's enough ideas to push out the door.
Right. And clearly they feel that there is a base to support it as well.
Yeah.
So,
and it shows to me, it just shows that there's a plethora of ideas out there to keep it fresh. And I don't know that there's, again, going to be a new color pip, or there's going to be a new weird mechanic to how characters work, like they folded last time, or they were big the first time, or they were gigantic when they were Titans. I don't know what the shtick is going to be this time. If there is one or isn't one, there's going to be continuations of those. But at least the ideas are there, and they're constantly pushing the envelope, in my opinion, to get it out. And just as a corollary, the reason why it was released April 1st, the way I understand it, is PAX East was this weekend, so there were Hasbro's headquarters are in Rhode Island, so the people from the WotC team that came out to PAX East, I don't know this for a fact, but likely was having some type of meeting.
I think that's a safe bet.
In the Boston area there. And I do know there were other meetings happening as well that talked about some of the announcements. And then also, I think Drew said something to the effect of they needed to get the information out there because of when stores need to, or when either stores or distributors, I don't know how it works, need to order things by mid-month of this month. So they needed to whet the appetite in order to get people ready to get their orders in, I think, by the mid-month.
That makes sense.
So that's why it's happening. That's why it's happened the day it did.
Right. It's also, I think a lot of the potential complaints are really just system shock. And then once this is a regular thing, it's not a big deal anymore. But because it's a departure from what we had the first time around, like you said, the gap between Wave 1 and Wave 2 was a chasm compared to this.
I think it's a lot of the complaints are because it's the internet.
Well, I think that's axiomatic. Yes, that's true. That's going to happen.
There's another vocal subset of people that complain a lot too that I have no sympathy for. So if you don't like it, move to another country. That's all I'm going to say about that with your releases.
So, aside from that, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up regarding the announcement of an announcement?
No, I don't want to wear too much tinfoil.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's the Wave 3/OP/whatever announcement. We'll circle back to it when we have more information, obviously. And as Scott mentioned, we are working on trying to get in touch with some Wizards reps in order to have them on so that we can hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yep.
So moving from there, even though we said we're not going to wear too many tinfoil hats and too much speculation, we didn't get to do this with Wave 2. And we're going to have a little bit of fun talking about characters that we want to see, characters that we think we might see, and I wanted to take some more pictures of my toys, so we have some of those on screen.
We actually were scheduled to do this the day that the Kotaku article came out, which is really, we had to scrap our entire show idea, and basically just, if you listen to that show, it's very off the cuff, because we were just completely blindsided by that article coming out that day, and we wanted to do this for Wave 2, and we weren't able to. So.
Exactly. So we got to get it in while we can at this stage before they do it to us again. So, Scott, you had sent me a list. We had talked about it offline of basically, let's just pick 5 characters. I think right off the bat, because he was on your list, he's on mine, but we already know that he's coming. We both think that we're going to see Soundwave in this set, correct?
Yeah, I believe what Drew has said is that there'll be multiples that come out in 2019, so it's getting to the point where we're going to have multiples. We're going to need to have it in one of these sets coming up soon, so I would just assume it's this one.
Yeah. So I guess we can get that one right off the top. I guess the main question I'd have before we drift too far away from him is, do you feel that is... So Rise of the Combiners, obviously, Combiners are the thing. Do you feel that Soundwave would justify an entire mechanic to himself, or do you think he's just going to have a unique mechanic within the set? So like Metroplex, but in Wave 3.
I think he'll just have a unique mechanic, and I don't think it'll be unique. I think there'll be Blaster as well.
Right.
The set.
Well, I mean unique compared to before, I guess.
Yeah, I think one thing they could do, and this is complete wild speculation by me, is almost like a combination of what we've seen thus far. So, like, you would have the Soundwave and Blasters as actual character cards, and if you had the cassettes as you could either have them as cheap character cards, like, 3-star or something like that, 4-star, or if you had them as battle cards, the precedent's already set to put star battle cards. So, like, let's just say, for example, the Soundwave was a 5-cost character that had insane stats, but he did nothing, for example, because all the cassettes also cost a star or 2 or something like that to put in your deck. So, like, his actual cost, like, would be, like, 10 or 11 if you actually, like, made full use of him. Otherwise, he would just have decent stats as a character. That's the way I envision seeing it. That it would like grow almost over time. Like the ability to actually get additional use out of him would be through the star battle card mechanic. I'm just taking a wild guess. That's what I would do. Yeah,
that's kind of where my head was at as well. And again, not to delve too far into some of the other ones, but I also had some of the headmasters / target masters on my list. They've both made a resurgence in various media. They've been showing up in the toy lines. And I think it would easily tie into, especially Target Masters, what you're describing. So maybe it's a battle card that it starts in your deck, costs some number of stars, you can play it, but then as a Headmaster or Target Master, when you play it, the appropriate partner, if they're in play, they do other thing, whatever the other thing happens to be, or they get boosted in some way because Chrome Dome's Headmaster is there, or whatever the case may be.
I'm not a fan of Headmasters or Target Masters myself, personally. I don't understand,
I'm not...
What the advantage... I don't get them. Like, when I was reading the comics and playing with the toys and stuff, it was almost like they had to become Headmasters because they, like, removed their own heads on purpose. Like, it didn't actually, like...
There was no purpose for it.
Yeah, right. It was a toy gimmick, not a lore gimmick.
Oh yeah, it was definitely.
I guess you could say
we're definitely in the territory of we needed to move these toys. We came up with this idea, make it happen. I don't care how you do it, sort of thing. I do like, and this is can't get that one out strictly because of the comics. Again, Chrome Dome, Brainstorm, those sort of characters, they become near and dear to me as a direct result of the IDW comics. it just the only reason, again, that I bring them up is because of the Soundwave / Blaster thing, that it feels like Target Masters / all the various other Legends toys, that clearly we've been getting characters because of some of the toy lines. It kind of fits, but again, it's just wild speculation of maybe we'll see it.
Yeah, that's fair.
What else did you have on your list, Scott, are these ones that you're excited about that like you personally want to see, or is it just you think we're lacking these characters?
Both. I think my list all Autobots?
You had a lot outside of the Soundwave Blaster thing. One of them was Ratchet, who I made a point to make sure I had a picture of, which I realized my only Ratchet that I own is my Transformers Prime one, which was kind of interesting to learn.
He just seems like a seminal character hasn't been released yet.
Right.
So I would say that, I think he was in the Bumblebee movie at one point. So I would say that he's probably. So I think he has a Siege of Cybertron toy because of that.
Right.
So he's just one that I think would be on there, and I feel like the repair mechanic built into him in some way, shape, or form hasn't been as explored as it probably could be, and I feel like in competitive play they overvalued the repair mechanic a little too much because it's just completely inefficient. So
right.
I think having some characters that could do that somehow, I think that we've seen enough play to know that it's a balanced enough mechanic where it won't be like what I'm just throwing it out there. Like if he flipped to do the medic ability, it would not be anything that was like game breaking or anything like that.
Right. Well, I guess it's going to all depend on the numbers, because I could certainly see a certain point where, okay, you're healing I guess it wouldn't be necessarily as good as just playing blue, because I guess you'd rather prevent the damage than heal it off. But at the same time, if you're playing blue and getting the healing on top of it, that's something that they brought up before, they being Wizards, of course, that they do want the game to play relatively quickly. So I agree with you that I think that healing in general could use both a boost and some additional exploration, but I get the feeling they're going to tread cautiously in those waters.
That's fair. I just think results have shown that it's not overpowered. So
yeah, at its current stage, of course. Yeah. I mean, they suddenly come out with something that's a pip and heal 5. Like, that's probably going everywhere.
Right, I agree. Heal 5 might be a little powerful. But... yeah,
that might be a little bit. But we'll have to see exactly what comes out. Now, you also had, I'm looking at your list, also over on the side here, rather. So, aside from the ones already mentioned, you had Perceptor, who was also on mine, as well as Ultra Magnus and Drift. Do they fall in the same categories that you think it's just, well, you have to have these characters? Or do you think there's a gameplay mechanic that you're looking for?
Well, Perceptor's already been on, like, he's on Tech Research, for example. He's been on Inverted. Like, he's obviously his IDW is much different than his
absolutely, yeah.
G1 classic incarnation. But I just feel like he's a character that a lot of fans, I guess, like or have a huge fondness for, like myself included. I do know that again, the game where most of the art comes from, the Transformers Legends or Transformers Rising, he was like a truck, I think eventually got re-released as that. He wasn't like the microscope or the whatever weird, you could turn the microscope into like a weird battle carrier thing if you like,
or some kind of cannon or something.
Yeah, so I do think that it would be like the truck version that was in those. That's
of course, yeah.
Shows.
Which actually brings up, not to bring up the man of the hour, but Soundwave, I'm very curious to see what version, because obviously I would think the majority of fans remember him as this guy, as a cassette player. I'm trying to do this without glare. This is my G1 from when I was a kid, hence why it's beat to all hell. But a lot of more recent incarnations, he was, for example, a UAV in Transformers Prime, which feels kind of appropriate. He was a satellite in the movies. He was a APC in a lot of other things, which also fits with he's a walking army himself. So like Perceptor, I'm curious to see which incarnations of these characters we're going to get. Is it more classic focused, or is it going to be the more updated, since they're literally could be people that open the packs and go, what is this alt mode?
Clearly the light post he's going to be.
Well, obviously. Okay, seriously, Wizards, if you're out there listening, you're now doing promos. I want a promo Soundwave with just the artwork because he's a light post. Because that would be awesome.
The episode 1 hidden light post.
Yeah. No one will ever notice me. Oh my god. I'm glad you brought that up because I was trying to find a way to worm it in, but that's good. Yep. So speaking of older G1 cast, one of the guys that I had on here was Rekgar, because he has been getting recent toy releases. The Junkions in general have been showing up in things. Do you care enough about Rekgar? Do you think there would be any interesting mechanics that you'd like to see from those guys?
I'd like to see the Junkions be like some type of army mechanic, where you could have more than one of them in play at the same time, and like, I don't know, you could transform or you could flip more than one of them at the same time, because like in the movie, like when the one became the motorcycle, the other one jumped right back on it and became like, you know, and vice versa. So I think that would be a cool mechanic.
Yeah.
So I would think like there would be some kind of mechanic, and he would probably buff them, and you have something similar on the other side with the Constructicons and Gnaw.
Yeah,
I think would be a cool thing, like mirror image of each other that way. Like one of them, I'm sure it'd be something simple, like Rekgar would add 1 defense to all Junkions, and Gnaw would add 2 attack to all, Constructicons or something like that, or so something simple like that.
The Constructicons were on my list. I'm looking at Legends Gnaw right now on screen. Do you think that, because I was taken by surprise that the Rise of the Combiners had Combiners this early. I had a feeling they were going to do it. I just didn't think it was going to be in set 2. Do you think we're going to get something to turn the world upside down, like that level of thing where it's a third faction, you know, because technically the Quintessons and Sharkticons, etc., I mean, they're bad guys, but they're not Decepticons. Or do you think there's anything else waiting in the wings, or is it just Soundwave, if assuming he's in here, that we're thinking is going to be the really out there mechanic?
I think your idea about how like the headmasters and things like that could work would be something similar to that, like using the battle deck to enhance the character lineup.
Makes sense.
So I don't know what's left. Like we have triple changers. I guess the only thing we don't have that, again, I'm not a huge fan of, are these like head target master. Like, is there any other mechanic that we're missing? Like, I don't even know.
We need ones that shoot missiles.
Okay.
I don't know how they're going to do it. You flip cards or something. I don't know. No, to your point, I mean, I'm looking around at my DTOFs real quick to think of any other ideas. A lot of them are variations on a lot of the ideas that we've already had. So, okay, 6 changers. Well, that's a triple changer, but more. You know, it's not...
Yeah, like we already have duocons. We already have... I guess we don't have whatever the things were. Well, I guess that's sort of like what headmasters are. Like the... what was it? Like, was it like... Not Power Masters, but there was like a whole show like where there was like Power Masters, wasn't there? Like, wasn't that the whole point of one of the shows?
Well, are you thinking of Cybertron Armada and those with like the cyber keys and stuff?
Mini-cons. Is that what they were called?
Oh, the mini-cons. Yeah. But that's... Yeah. I don't think that... So, obviously, if they didn't have like this huge mechanic built around them, I don't think that it would be much different than like the Soundwave thing. It's like, okay, they're really little guys. I guess if they explored other ranges, it would be, you know, Beast Wars or something like that, where...
Which they already said they're not doing anytime soon.
Exactly. So I don't think we're going to verge into that territory, despite there have been Beast Wars characters. Like, I'm not expecting like a Beast Wars set, but I could see maybe Optimus Primal or Rhinox or Rat Trap show up just because they've both been in recent media. They've been in some of the toy lines. Those sort of things, like a one-off character. But at the same time, I don't know if they're going to want to put Maximals or Predacons on, like, stamped on the card in the corner, sort of thing.
Right. I mean, we had a similar conversation before that day that the Kotaku article
that
came
fateful day.
Where we didn't think, like, you know, Combiners were coming out, so, like, well, who knows? But
exactly.
But I think there's enough I mean, my whole list is, quote, traditional characters, for example. Like, would it surprise me if there was 2 more Scramble City combiners? Like, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all. But, like, I don't, if it, like, is it going to be just as seamless to just put in 2 more combiner teams in the set, like, and just have them, like, you know, don't have to up the number of times that you open a pack and get one, because I guess that was, like, part of the set, like, you got more of them. Like, is it just as easy just to slip them in as a normal card? Like, is that going to be, like, I don't think it should be confusing for people. Like, if here's another combiner team, like, you know, or something like that.
I was thinking about that earlier. Good, sorry.
It doesn't have to be a full theme of the set. It could just be every set from now on out, we're going to put, like, 2 combiner teams in or something like that. Who knows? I don't know.
Exactly, and that's what I was thinking earlier, is that you could soak up, say, Bruticus and Victorion. They're all going to fit in now that we've established helicopters. We already have spaceships, tanks, trucks, whatever, you know. We already have all of these tribes, so they could all fit in, and you're only soaking up 10 character slots out of, say, the 40 that are there. You can, as opposed to Rise of the Combiners, where it's, if combiners weren't your thing, you might have been in a tough spot because there's just not that many other character options. But this way you could still supplement the previous set's mechanics while simultaneously pushing a whole bunch of new stuff, and you have the volume to get something interesting in there.
Yeah, agreed.
One character.
So my list had no combiners on it.
Right, yeah, we were kind of... I do have Bruticus on here because he's the one that I'm hoping for personally. I saw a bunch of people on Facebook. I got really attached to him with Fall of Cybertron because it was fun to play as Bruticus. But one set of characters that I was surprised you didn't have on your list, Scott, was the bad guys from the movie.
I don't know. I just came up with 5 real quick.
Well, I figured that was the case because we were just kind of, all right, give me 5 characters. But I'm surprised that you didn't immediately go to Galvatron, Scourge, and Cyclonus.
I mean, I would like a movie set, but I don't think that's going to happen because I just don't see that the movie, even though all media that I has it as obviously the pinnacle multi-medium outlet for the IP, it doesn't always seem to be that, like the original animated, it doesn't seem to always be that way. But I mean, if it was me, I would make a whole set on the animated movie personally. But, you know,
well, I don't know if they necessarily need a whole set, but they could easily draw. I mean, clearly the theme, if that was the theme, it would be great. But I think they could include these characters and it would be fine.
I think a lot of these characters have crossed over to have much bigger general appeal through the comics or through the toys and things like that after the movies come out. So, like, you know, and we've already seen a bunch of them, you know, be released in the first 2 sets with either being part of other teams or just there, like RC and Blur and things like that, and Springer and we actually haven't seen I don't think any of the Decepticons that came out. Right,
and that's why I don't want to say surprised because it's not even to that extent, but I will just say surprised that we haven't seen any trace of them up to this stage. So that's why I'm thinking we may get them. I'm hoping... I'm looking at Skull Smasher and Skylinks right now, that if the combiner mechanic... And this may be one way that they do it. Say Bruticus or Victorion are a Devastator box set down the line, that they squeeze in some of the other smaller combiner teams in the set. Again, just for the purpose of... You're not eating up a whole bunch of character and or battle card slots. Because Skylinks or Overlord or something along those lines could just be a combiner, but of the Dreadwing variety.
A combiner in the card game sense, not in the traditional...
Right.
Like Transformers War sense.
Exactly.
Which Dreadwing is not either, so...
Yeah. But it's a... I guess that's why they wanted this. I mean, part of it's separating out the Enigma to call attention to it for other lore reasons, but I could see some of those ending up being as part of the inclusion. Yeah. As we're going through it, some of the other ones that I had put on the list, like Runabout and Run Amok, just for this, and I had this for a lot of these that I have up here. I was going to talk about for Wave 2, and I removed a whole bunch. Like I had Warpath on there and a bunch of others that, like Dirge, that obviously we got. I had Runabout and Runamuck just for the sake of more Decepticon cars, to maybe supplement the Stunticons. But are there any others that you thought of as we're going through this, Scott, that you think you're going to see, or any specific mechanics that you want to see that, okay, this needs to get fleshed out?
No, mechanic-wise, I don't want to speculate on. It's just more about the characters. Like I had the big ones. Like I had Ultra Magnus. I had Drift.
Right.
I had. I think that was it. I think we hit everybody else. So.
Yeah, I think those are good calls, because Drift is. I mean, they've already had Deadlock, so I would expect that we're going to see him at some point. Ultra Magnus feels like another obvious one, for want of a better way to describe it.
Yeah, it's again big characters that we haven't seen, in my opinion, and they're not obscure at all. So
of course,
you know.
So
and I think Ultra Magnus has a Siege of Cybertron character that just came out. And whatever I
saw it in Walmart today.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Whatever the big version is or whatever. So
yeah. So here's the other question I wanted to ask you: do you feel that we're going to get even more iterations of the Evergreen character? So we're going to see our 12th Optimus Prime, or whatever we're up to, you know.
I mean, I wasn't expecting to see this version because I didn't know it in Sentinels. So I would. I mean, we know that the other starter. So if we assume the starter is a supplement to Wave 3 as opposed to just its own standalone thing, then I'm not sure. I would think not. If we count the starter, I think there will be different versions of certain characters that we have, but I can't say, because there's a million versions of all these characters, and there's been, you know, every single thing under the sun. There, you know, what are we up to, like 4 or 5 Bumblebees, 4 or 5 Optimuses, you know, etc. So
exactly,
we could. I just I for some reason I'm thinking, because of the speed at which the set is coming out and all that this set is going to build upon mechanics that exist in the first 2 sets and expand upon them, and not be as wholesale different as I feel like the first 2 sets kind of were with each other.
Right.
So I feel like I mean, I'm not saying there's not going to be new pips, and there's not going to be new pip colors, there's not going to be new character mechanics. I just feel like it's probably going to play itself out as a supplement to those, which in my opinion would mean that we don't need new versions of the seminal characters as much.
I think that's true. The only thing that's holding me back with it, or pushing me into the territory of we're going to get our umpteenth Optimus, Bumblebee, Megatron, and Starscream, is, well, Hasbro on that side has been expressing their whole Evergreen idea. And as such, it's kind of like, I almost feel the team is obligated to include them. Not that we have any inside information, but it may just be a directive, like, you have to have Optimus in every set, just like every toy line has an Optimus in the beginning, has a Bumblebee in the beginning, kind of thing, where it's, well, no matter what, it's somebody's jumping on point, and those are arguably the 4 most recognizable characters, so we want them there all the time. And eventually you'll just build your team of entirely Optimus, or whatever. You can kind of do that now, I guess.
It's possible, yeah, for sure.
It's going to be interesting. I don't feel burnout on those characters. I mean, I do like those characters, some more than others. Like, I could take or leave Bumblebee. The other 3 I'm more interested in. But I guess the only potential negative would be, are they, for the 15th iteration of them, eating up a character slot for someone that we haven't seen yet, which obviously, by definition, that it could have been someone else, but I get why they may have to include them.
Yeah, I mean, when we're making this list, I told you I could go pretty deep, so it's definitely going to be taking up a character slot of somebody that I've heard of, because I went pretty deep in telling you how far I could go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we did have, offline, we had an amusing discussion about obscure characters, we'll call it that. And there's plenty more where those came from. So and somebody out there, those characters are their favorite character, and that's they'll never be shaken from that. But anyway, that's pretty much all I had for wildly guessing. I mean, I'm hoping maybe I have Broadside on here because I thought it would be funny to get him and Beachcomber or just boats in general or other things like that, just for more bizarre tribes, although it isn't absolutely necessary. Anything else you want to add? Okay.
There's plenty of 1984, 85, and 86 characters that we have not seen yet. So
yeah,
I don't know how often some of those characters get reprinted in terms of toys, but I mean, there's just plenty of characters out there that we have not seen yet that definitely had pretty prominent speaking roles. In the original cartoon. So,
well, the Terracons just got re-released. There's a rumor as of today that the Seacons might see a release in the near future.
I said seminal characters, not obscure.
I'm just throwing other things out there. I guess for you, we might be obscure, but Jackie is going to be really excited if we ever see a Bulkhead, who has shown up in a lot of, or Lugnut in recent media for people that are animated fans. They've made the jump to other Transformers media in more recent stuff, but they're not quite seminal characters like you were describing. The bottom line is there's a lot of like miles long characters. You can spend days on TF Wiki or something just looking at random characters and reading their one-line bios for the vast majority of them. And there's no way we're going to cover all of them.
No, we just wanted to get it out there so that we could do this before there's a chance that on Monday, if they give said information, they could spoil 10 cards like they did the first time. So then we'd be like, damn it. So
I kind of expect a spoiler, and expect may be too strong, but I assume we're going to get at least a look at those promos, or something along those lines. Maybe they'll play it closer to the vest and show us later, but to me, I feel like that would make sense. But by the time everybody's listening to this, we'll find out. We'll already know.
Yep.
So moving on from the wild speculation, we're into something a little more concrete, and that was an event that just took place this past weekend. And we actually had a really good turnout for it.
Yeah, decent.
It was pretty solid.
Could always use more.
Yeah, don't take that. Nobody out there listening should take that as, oh, don't worry about it, we got it covered. No, show up to events, come out and come play, because the more the merrier is definitely true in this case. But we wanted to recap the top 4 lists. There were some new interesting ones, as well as some old favorites, I guess we'll say. I guess it depends on which end of it you are.
Yeah, so our event was at Showcase Comics and Games in Swarthmore, PA. 21 players played. I guess we didn't have deck lists, so like I can't sit there and say like how many of everything there were, but I believe I want to say the most represented decks. Now, obviously, the 40 card battle lists are not the same,
of course.
But I want to, and some of them are wildly different, as a matter of fact. I want to say the most represented decks in general were Aerialbots, Predacons, and Constructicons as deck archetypes that I saw multiple.
But there were even within those, like you said, it's not just the battle decks were different; they were wildly different ends of the spectrum for some of those decks.
Oh yeah, totally agree. But I just know as like character teams, I think those were the most represented, in at least multiple times. There was a few traditional Dinobot lists as well that I saw multiple people running as well. So
yeah, I think there might have been some of the new wave Dinobots, and that is the Wheeljack Grimlock builds, where it's double Grimlock focus, I think running around as well.
And there was a few Sentinels as well, too.
Yes. And we did have a variety of, for lack of a better way to group them, we'll call them rogue builds. And for those of you not familiar with it, it's just kind of things that like you have no idea what they are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we had a huge variety in decks, I guess, is the point.
Yeah, definitely.
So in the top 4, and you can see them on screen, you can definitely check out VectorSigma.info if this is scrolling too fast and you're too lazy to hit the pause button to look at the list, or, if you're driving or listening to it on audio. We had a top 4 consisting of Aerialbots, Sentinels, Constructicons, and the Touch. So the old school Nemesis Optimus build. All updated, obviously, for Wave 2, and clearly Constructicons, they made their debut and did pretty well. So where would you like to start, Scott? Any comments on any of these right off the top?
We can start with Dan's Aerialbot list, because we already had a long conversation about it. I think it was, 2 shows ago, I want to say, or was it last show? I don't remember at this point.
They all run together after a while.
So Dan played our team's version of the deck with the changes that I recommended. I did not run the deck again, so it was 2 episodes ago. I didn't run the deck again that I top forward with at the last event, so I wanted to run something different, which we can get into later. But we did cut 1 Energon Axe and the what's it called? The backup plan for a work overtime and a pep talk. So we had 1 less total upgrade and 1 total action, and then the obvious switch from backup plan to 1 work overtime.
Right.
And the deck obviously performed well. So.
Yeah, quick story about that. If you haven't seen it, because I'm not sure if it's live yet, Mark and Dan, prior to the event, had a fun little get-together in choosing what they were going to play. So Dan somehow, I want to say lucked out, but let's just say his build ended up being better than the one Mark had to play.
Yes.
So you can definitely check that out. If it's not live by the time this goes up, be on the lookout for it, because it's definitely entertaining.
And he echoed most of the statements that I said, basically that the deck was exactly the way I assumed it would play out. He felt it was very, very good and very purposely one-dimensional, but played exactly out the way it was supposed to. So
right. So basically, the changes that you made, one was a straight upgrade, or as close to a straight upgrade as you can get, and then the other one was one that we had debated for 45 minutes a few shows ago.
Yes. Yes.
Other than that, the list, again, you can check it out on VectorSigma.info. It's, card for card, aside from those 2 changes, the same sort of thing. And
all these lists are up there in their actual incarnation as well.
Yes.
Yep.
So the other 3 were the Constructicons, Sentinels, and the Touch. Do you want to talk about the Touch a little bit and John's upgrades to it, since that's another one that people may be familiar with?
Yeah, so John's upgrades were basically eschewing the permanent body armors for sparring gears, which I think is correct, but I believe he kept the reinforced plating in the deck.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's 2 sparring gears, 3 platings.
Yeah, so that seems... I probably still wouldn't even run that much armor, considering the ubiquitous nature of Bashing Shield, but it's fine. Obviously, if you stick 1, it's good. So he chose to also play less treasure hunts. He still played draw arms, which I don't agree with, but he said it was still good for him all day, just to draw a card occasionally. I just don't think that card is necessary anymore, but he said it did well for him.
Right.
And then otherwise, he had 3 security consoles. He had your basic change of defensive build to account for Wave 2, essentially. Otherwise, I believe most of it was pretty standard.
Yeah, he had the upgrades in marksmanship, so he split marksmanship and plasma burst at 2 each. Notably, he ran the Miser's copy of Photon Bomb.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
He did mention multiple times that it was strictly, as you'd imagine, for combiner matchups, so that he could get a whole bunch of damage in on them. I don't think he ever actually played it, though, unless I misheard.
No, he played it a couple times, yeah.
Did he? Okay.
I saw him play a couple times, yeah.
Okay. I didn't get a chance to watch any of his games, so I wasn't absolutely sure. But other than that, it's kind of what you'd expect. You have all your usual blue pieces with the obvious upgrades for actions where you can. Espionages are showing up. Scott already talked about security consoles as included in upgrades. It's kind of what you'd expect. The deck still can do some really mean things. So despite being, and I mentioned this in the mistakes article that you had posted this week, Scott, that heeding the lessons of the past is important to keep in mind as we go forward. Things don't necessarily drop off or wholesale change simply because new toys are available.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll say is that it's kind of hard to explain because I'm sure most of the listeners, it doesn't feel this way, but like, to me, this deck had been out of favor as the answer to the metagame because for the last two events of Wave 1, they were pretty much dominated by 3 wide Optimus builds, not 2 tall Optimus builds, and the 2 tall Optimus builds performed extremely poorly against the 3 tall Optimus build.
Right.
So for me, like, this was not the Optimus build of choice any longer, so that's why it feels like it kind of came back to me, even though I'm sure in other places it probably won't feel that way, just because they might not have had as much opportunity to have the meta evolve
right
to where there were even enough events to feel that way. So I can understand why some people might think it's like, oh, this deck again, but I really don't feel that way.
Yeah, it's more of a resurgence than it is the status quo, I guess.
Right,
specifically for this build.
And the second and third characters didn't do a lot of damage on their own, and that can be detrimental in combiner matchups but having a 6 or 7 attack second character and actually giving them less turns to flip so they can combine earlier kind of was an advantage for him.
Right.
In the situation, like, I know I feel like this deck had certain matchups that were better for it than 3 wide and certain matchups that were worse for it in 3 wide, especially whether you were going first or whether you were going second.
Of course.
It was a huge factor, like in our match, for example. And he, he lost to the Sentinels in the top 4, and I do think that match is heavily not in his favor.
Yeah,
it's no different than it was in Wave 1 against, like, Dinobot type situations.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it remains a solid deck. I would like to see a 2 tall build try a different second character because I feel like Nemesis is just extremely weak to press the advantage, which is everywhere.
Right.
And especially if if an Autobot combiner team plays press the advantage when they have like 3 characters left to attack, it's going to be a real bad time for Nemesis. So
yeah,
I just feel like he's very easy to deal with. So
right now specifically, yes, because press is showing up in anything that can reasonably run it. The challenge here, and I think the maybe not obvious replacement is the new Bumblebee, but definitely on the short list of replacements. I personally have reservations about it for his own fragility, because if you hang him out there in bot mode, it'll matter adding up those extra attacks that they're sinking into him, hypothetically. But I also, again, as I said in my mistakes, I had kind of mentally put this deck to the side, not because I thought that it was 100% dead, but I thought Bashing Shield was going to just beat it up so much that nobody would play it. But obviously John proved that incorrect, doing so well.
I mean, he played. I think he played 5 combinerless on the way to the top 4. So I mean, like, obviously it has strengths and weaknesses against certain versions of some combinerless. I still think it's not. And I'm working on a large article about the continuum of the metagame instead of the rock paper scissors nature of it. Like, just because of the way the mechanics of the game work, you can't just have one control deck, one mid-range deck, and one aggro deck. And I just feel like this slants itself to where it has weaknesses against other control decks, but can have strengths against certain aggro decks.
Right.
But will probably still struggle with the extremely aggro. Like, it's slanted in the control side of the spectrum, but closer to the middle where the aggro control decks are, which means you're worse against aggro control decks like Sentinels. You're worse against you're weak against the poles, which is your heavy aggro and your heavy control, but you do well against the things that are in between there.
Gotcha.
So that's how I see it.
I think the the other caveat for this is everything you're saying is true, but also that Optimus Prime can make up for a lot of deficiencies on his own, which kind of skews it. So for anybody out there listening that is wondering, well, when I'm running the touch, it never loses, or it just beats up some of the things that we're saying that it may be, or we would expect the deck to underperform against. Optimus Prime can sometimes just go, well, I'm going to take over a game, and there's not much you can do about it. It's one of those characters that has the ability to do that, which I think skews a lot of thoughts about it in general, as compared to other lists where it's okay, they need to follow a certain line of play, they need to accomplish certain things. Optimus Prime can go, oops, well, I just flipped a whole bunch of burn and blew up your whole team.
Yeah, and I also still think that like having a secondary character that does that much damage off the bat, like 6 or 7, is just different than the way of like with when you played Flame War and X, where you needed action cards or upgrades to make them into combat viable. Now, if you play an upgrade or action on that second character, they're over the limit they need to be to take out a combiner, which was just like a different way of playing against it.
Absolutely.
So again, like I just think that's why it's different than it was in the past, where like 3 wide was kind of the better deck.
Mm-hmm.
I just think against the combiner heavy meta, which I know there was a lot there that day, and he faced it a lot.
Right.
It can make a difference.
And to be honest, I don't anticipate combiners dropping off anytime soon for all of the reasons you'd expect. Obviously, Aerialbots and other teams are performing well, so people are going to gravitate towards things that play well. They're also favorites from a fan perspective, so I like whatever combiner team. I'm going to play them. I don't care. You're going to end up seeing combiner teams wherever you're playing, most likely. So if this continues to play out, that the touch is maybe not necessarily favored against all of them, but at least some of them, or has an advantage, it's worth considering going forward, especially if you're considering playing one of those combiner teams. Be aware of what you're going to be facing down.
Yeah.
So any other thoughts on the updated lists?
I would say the Sentinels list is also an updated list.
Yeah, that was the one that's kind of on the, well, I guess it falls in the same category as Aerialbots. So yeah, we'll call that an updated one as well. This is one that Stefan has been working on. He even said after the event that he's planning on playing this deck until somebody gives him a really good reason not to. And kind of like what we were just talking about, I'm hard-pressed to come up with a reason not to play it, because it's pretty strong.
Yeah, Stefan finally made some adjustments that that other people have recommended, and he took in our advisement and I think made it into his own, so that you'll see more blanks in the deck now. I think he had a full play set of 1-shell stands, and I think 2
ISO functions.
Yes. Which are very powerful in this deck, considering you automatically start with characters in your scrap pile or in the KO pile. So you can start using it right away. So I think that's powerful. Otherwise, he has the full disruption package with the 3 espionages to supplement the Mirage ability, and he continues to have the 1 Enigma in the deck, which we've had numerous conversations. I don't disagree with him. I don't understand where it's better. It's hard for me to envision a situation where, like, my whole situation is just basically you're turning your last Optimus, a guy that's usually alive, into a 9 cost.
It's a really good grenade launcher.
Right. So, but I don't know if you have to change your entire. I don't think you have to change that much of your deck plan to play it. It's just a safety valve.
Exactly. He did indicate that he was making some additional changes to the power swords that are in here are going to get the axe. I'm not sure exactly what he said he was going to change them for. I think he talked about it in the post-game interview with Dan.
Yeah, that we put up this week, yeah.
So,
the only card that's not in here that I just flat don't agree with it not being in here is that there's no reckless charge.
That may be what he was talking about changing it over, because I'm looking at some supercharges right now, and that's usually the slot where we've all said, okay, we'll trade 1-for-1, essentially.
Yeah, the deck remains powerful. Yeah, the sequencing remains important.
Do you feel it's any better or worse positioned after this event? I mean, obviously, Stefan did really well with it, but do you feel that it's people still haven't figured out how to play against it, or is it just so strong that it doesn't matter?
The decks that are good against it are wide, aggressive decks. If those decks aren't seeing play, or aren't piloted correctly, or have terrible draws, then this deck will continue to do well because it has extremely good matchups against any control deck. I'm not even positive that you. I have tested everything other decks I have ideas for, but like I'm not even sure that a control deck can be made that can do well against this because of just the fact that you have these extra abilities just on the characters. You never have to flip.
I feel like it would have to be something Optimus based because you're getting those extra plays despite them shredding your hand, and also trying to make up for that. Like you said, they start with effectively extra cards due to the flips. That helps close the gap somewhat, but I don't know if that's sufficient.
But Optimus has always suffered to Dinobots, and this is the better Dinobots. So, like, I agree with you there. It's tough. From a control perspective, I'm not really sure what you need to do to combat it, but I can tell you that, like, I mean, we're going to talk about it last, but there's another aggro deck you can play. Like, I feel like it's wide, and I'm talking 4 wide or beyond. I just feel like it's wide aggro decks. It's going to have weaknesses too,
right?
And I think the deck needs to be adjusted in a way where you understand as the player that you need to tech the deck out for your bad matchups and not keep slanting yourself to make your good matchups better.
You don't need to win more. If you're already beating up the control decks, what's the point of... If you're already winning at 98, do you really need the 99th percent, I guess?
Yeah, and I'm not positive that like that hasn't been done yet. I just know that I have to play a deck long enough to understand that. And I'm sure Stefan would definitely know this better than me. But I just feel like I think that deck needs to reach that point where it's like, I really need to lay it out and think, this is good. This just helps me win these control matchups that I'm in any way.
Right.
So I need to find ways to help me against these wide aggro matchups. I'm not positive that even exists in Orange Shell, just because like it's still an orange-based deck at the end of the day.
Yeah. You're definitely fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah, but if it does, you need to find a way to play those cards.
Makes sense. This is another one that, not to be a broken record, but expect to see this one, as Scott was saying, and as Stefan was saying as well, like, until there's a compelling reason not to. So if your area is flooded with a bug infestation, yeah, you're probably not going to play this, because that's one of the things that it's not excited to see. But it just does so many mean things constantly and repeatedly. Yeah. That's basically the bottom line. I'm not going to stutter on and repeat the same thing over again. Any other thoughts for Sentinels going forward?
No, it's a good deck.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the one that everybody was maybe not surprised by, but probably tuning in for and waiting to hear about is the Constructicon list that was piloted by Craig. So, Craig, if you remember way back when, he was the first person that I saw do well with the touch. So this was pre-PAX. And he showed up. I hadn't seen him at a few events, although I missed some, admittedly. And he top forward with orange Constructicons. So what was your initial reaction when you saw him sit down with this, Scott?
I was what impresses me about the decks that he makes is the single-mindedness of them.
Mhm.
I don't know what his card game background is. I don't know if he played. I know some people that played. I guess it's Vanguard, the Card Flight Vanguard game. I think has a similar mechanics to this, and I think he might have played that game. I think that like the color-sided focus of the decks is always extremely in one side or the other for decks that he's made.
Mhm.
So I was just very impressed that he stuck to his guns and had like so much orange in the deck, and it just did really well.
Mhm.
What really impressed me that he understood what the advantages of the deck are and how to make use of them, which is basically all my cards that are like, first of all, one, I need to get value out of every single one of my characters, so I'm going to play a ton of upgrades.
Yep.
And the only action cards I'm going to play are going to be extremely powerful combat.
Yeah, reckless charges.
Or they're going to draw me 4 cards. Like
that,
mathematically, 3 cards or more with Treasure Hunt and Work Overtime. So that really impressed me. That he saw the need to get value out of every single one of these stupid characters that are like individually worthless, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that he needed to always have a full hand in order to make use of their ability to combine as fast as possible into a version of a character that's actually playable in Devastator. So he was able to do that with the single-minded nature of having so much card draw and having upgrades. So he knew that he needed to play an upgrade every single turn as best as possible to make the guys worth it in their unflip modes and pitch a card, which both Treasure Hunt and Work Overtime allowed him to do.
Right.
I think the only actions he played were the Enigma and Reckless Charge, and I think that's it, right?
So I'm looking at it right now. It's Reckless Charge, Treasure Hunt, Enigma, Work Overtime.
Yeah.
Everything else was either a weapon or an armor or a utility.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I take it back. There was Peace Through Tyranny, but I'm not counting that one.
for its pitch.
Just because somebody's going to say, it's like, you forgot about that card. No, I just wasn't counting it.
The text on it's blank for this deck. Can't even play it.
Exactly, yeah. So I did ask him, to your point about the single-minded nature, I asked him afterwards about heavy landing, for example, because I feel that I've been running that in all the Devastator builds that I had proxied up. I was only able to get Devastator earlier this week. And it was exactly what you said. That you said, no, I want all oranges. I want to make sure that every time they're flipping oranges. And it makes sense. The Treasure Hunt point is also something that's very important because effectively you're always playing 2 cards a turn because of the discard mechanic, maybe 3 cards a turn. So the fact that you have 6 draw 4s, or as close to draw 4 as you can get, is very crucial for the entire deck. And I don't think that the redundancy of the draws... So once you combine to Devastator, I drew a Power Punch, but I already have Grenade Launcher, I already have Flamethrower, or whatever, or Erratic Lightning, all of the additional effects. Who cares? You're 10 bolt too. It doesn't matter. That being said, that's where I personally lean towards. I feel it still wants heavy landings or one-shell stands or something like that, because I think it would help solve some of the issues where the Constructicons sometimes are just not going to get there pre-combine, and that helps shorten your clock. So if they have 3 or more guys, you just may not get there quick enough. You're crushing every guy, but it's still going to take you 3 turns to get through them all, sort of thing. Things like Shrapnel may be a serious issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's room to explore some of those things. But I understand why you didn't run them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to in any way make it sound like I know more than he does. He clearly performed better than I did, and he put up a really strong showing with his deck. So I'd be curious his additional thoughts on any changes that he would make going forward. If you're out there, Craig, let us know, because I want to play this deck. I want to learn more about it. So go ahead.
No, I mean, like I said, I was just impressed with the deck's builds, understanding that you need to get value at every of your attack phases, whether it's getting stuff on the tower or just getting value out of a character. Period.
Right.
And also this what was interesting to me was the 6-character nature of the deck meant that he was definitely going to go. Games were going to go longer, so that a card like Enforcement Baton, which I never played personally, had value there because your opponent was going to get more than one swing with a weapon, which doesn't always happen. So both the nature of the Constructicons may not being able to take out a guy, and the fact that it was going to go longer meant that you had targets that were alive for a weapon that destroys a weapon that's also orange, and you can get it into your hand.
Yep.
Through the green mechanic. So I think it was a really good deck to play that card in.
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out, because that's something that may stand out to a lot of people as to, but why?
Yeah, it stood out to me. So that impressed me, and I understood when we talked about it, like why he played it and why it shouldn't be like cut or anything like that.
Right.
Playing things like Ironhide Blaster, it was really good. I mean, the only obviously the worst weapon in the deck is the flamethrower, but I mean, you can't run Mining Pick. So
yeah.
I'm not really sure if you're going to continue to run a deck this heavy with weapons, I don't even think another one does exist that you can run.
That's something that future waves will definitely help fill out, because your options are just, you're kind of at the ceiling at this stage.
Yeah, because your other weapons are both blue based, so like you can't really I mean, I would argue you could probably just get away with running if you wanted to get away with a few blues here or there. Like you could probably shave some numbers here and do things. But I still think like the way the deck was created in order to make use of Treasure Hunt and Work Overtime was impressive. And the other thing is, there was a poll in the Facebook group, and I wound up having a conversation offline about Builder's Tools and how good or bad of a card it was in this, because a lot of times basically people are like, well, I have to pitch a card anyway if I don't have a card to pitch. And my whole point about Builder's Tools is you only get upside out of the card. So if you have the extra cards in your to pitch one to the Constructicon that you're also playing the Builder's Tool on, you're going to wind up getting an extra repair counter for that turn. Period. Like there's no doubt about that. Now the argument was, well, you're not going to have that many cards in your hand. Well, a deck like this is going to have that many cards in its hand.
Right.
So like if it has, we'll just call Treasure Hunt a draw for argument's sake, and we'll call Work Overtime also a draw 3 most of the time, because you're obviously going to play it if you only have one card in hand also.
Right.
So like if you're always going into the combat step, if you're going into the if you're going into the play and upgrade phase with 4 cards in your hand in some way, shape, or form minimum, you can afford to play a Builder's Tool and also pitch the card.
Yeah, you're going to feed the Constructicons without an issue.
Right, and I think most people had in their mind that wasn't going to happen. But to me, the card only has upside. It can only gain you another. It can't lose you a counter. If it's your only card in your hand, it's the same exact thing as pitching it to the Constructicon. It has no downside at all.
Right.
To play. Like, as long as you're playing an orange-based deck, it has absolutely no downside other than it takes up cards, 1 to 3 card slots in your deck for no stat value. But I don't think that matters, considering they want to have as many counters as possible before they combine.
Exactly.
So, it shouldn't matter. To me, the card has only upside, no downside.
Well, additionally, it's an upgrade, which it sounds obvious. Okay, it feeds more treasure hunts, but that's the whole point, is that it feeds more treasure hunts. And at this stage, as you were describing, Scott, you kind of ran out of weapons to run. You kind of ran out of because yes, you could run, say, body armor, but why?
No, you wouldn't.
The
conversation I had was comparing it to Datapad, which I think is not even a comparison.
Right.
This card is. I will say, you can make the argument for Data Bank.
I saw that used to great effect, because you have 6 guys, you slam it on one of the guys in the back, and you're probably drawing a bunch of cards.
Right. I can see the argument there. but I would probably still run it in addition, not instead of.
I agree. Again, it could be just let's shave some numbers here and there. If flamethrower's the worst weapon, maybe a builder's tool, a flamethrower, and something else become 3 databanks or 2 databanks, or something along those lines.
It's still an upgrade, so it's still something you can, and it's still a white, so it's still like something you can get and still has value. So
exactly. And
any white, because you're only playing 3 of them now, I think is just going to help you get to the Enigma also. So
exactly. So aside from the individual cards themselves, it ended up, my understanding, because I was playing, I took forever, kind of like I did with with the last event. I didn't get to watch this played until the very end when I was standing on the sidelines. My understanding is that the only things that it lost to were Aerialbots. Is that accurate?
Twice, yeah. It lost to Dan in the Swiss and in the top 4.
Okay.
And so, he admitted his match Aerialbots are really bad, which doesn't surprise me. Aerialbots eats any wide aggro deck for breakfast.
Yeah, and
except for Predacons, but yeah.
And that's kind of what I would expect going in, like you said. I'm curious again, any thoughts as to speculation as to what you think also would line up well against this? I'm expecting that we're going to see a lot of Constructicons going forward for the same reasons we were describing earlier. It seems to be relatively strong at the very least, and they are a fan favorite. Let's face it, there are a lot of Constructicon fans out there, or really a lot of Devastator fans. So I anticipate we're going to see a lot of green and purple guys running rampant. So is there anything right off the top of your head aside from Aerialbots that you think is going to eat this alive?
I don't know how it does against like a 3-wide deck. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm. 3-wide like Optimus, or you mean 3-wide like Sentinels?
3-wide like Optimus. No, it should beat Sentinels.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously extremely hurt by armed hovercraft. So any deck that is running that is going to hurt it big time.
Right.
So like. And that's just a meta shift, like, playing armor hovercraft or playing photon bomb and things like that are going to hurt it tremendously.
Absolutely.
So I think the decks that, besides Aerialbots that we know of, I just think that other blue-based decks that can run armed hovercraft and basically just armed hovercraft, because I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that you would like. I'm not going to run strafing run.
Well,
and I just don't think that Photon Bomb is going to see that much play. I would think that it's going to be weak to anything that can run that effectively. And honestly, like any deck that has a plethora of direct damage that can already be strong against like wide decks to begin with is probably going to have it's probably going to have trouble with those decks.
Yeah.
Like I said, the thing with the 3-wide Optimus type build is just that, like, sometimes the Flame War and X character, which is still in flux, just may not be able to actually kill a character when they attack. So you just may not have enough time to actually kill enough guys. But if you do build your deck with enough direct damage, you're probably going to hurt them because you're going to be taking out, like, obviously every Optimus swing is going to take out a guy.
Clearly.
Regardless. And then, if you flip the direct damage as opposed to the combat pumps, you're going to hurt them, probably kill 2 guys in one, almost guaranteed every single time. And there's only so many of those you can actually take. So I'd be curious to see how that matchup would play out. But again, the 3-wide Optimus build was built to hurt decks like Insecticons, and this is just a 6-wide. This deck is essentially a 6-wide Insecticon type build, just complete aggro. So I'd just be curious how that matchup plays out. I would imagine you combine with 15 health left on you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Because once you become Devastator, I think it's tough for the 3-wide build, because obviously you're probably one-shotting the 2 smaller guys at that point.
I think if the Constructicons can either damage Optimus sufficiently that he's one-shottable as Devastator, or they eliminate at least one of the little guys, then they have a chance. Because that's what I was talking about earlier, where it's how many turns. Yeah, your Devastator punches for 1,000,000, but it's still going to take you 3 turns to get through those guys. And if you combine with only 15 health, you could just be dead to the first Optimus swing.
I mean, I'm sure his first Devastator attack is doing something like 15, though, at all times. Because it's like, you usually have a 3-attack weapon on you. Mm-hmm. You usually have, like, or a 4-attack weapon on you. Like, you usually have Bolt 2. Like, you always have the Bolt 2, and then you usually have 10 attack. Like, there's only so many 15-attack things you can take before you're dead. So,
oh, yeah. Absolutely. But if it were... So, Optimus, if he literally took no damage prior to that, could hypothetically eat one of those attacks.
Oh, yeah.
And that's my point, is like...
I don't think you can eat 2. That's
Oh, 2, yeah. I can't imagine. That would be some really bizarre circumstances, and I'm not sure that's even possible. But we'll say it is, just for the sake of argument. I'd be very curious how this does also, speaking of the touch, how it aligns there, because as compared to Flame War plus other bot, who may not actually get there against some of the Constructicons, or depending on which one, even with the help of Burn, depending on how the cards shake out, Nemesis is just crushing them every time and should be one-shotting them, or at least more likely to one-shot them than a Flame War. So and again, you brought it up earlier, they're being given less turns to combine. So I'm curious how that one plays out. There's a number of matchups. Basically, I want to play more Constructicons, so I have a lot of work to do.
It would seem that they would need that upgrading action phase to actually do damage, and if you're limiting the number they actually have because of the number of characters you have, it would seem to play to the strengths of the 2 tall deck, which is strange. But that doesn't surprise me, considering the deck was built to take out Insecticons. So it doesn't surprise me, considering this is just a version of that.
Yeah.
The wide aggro deck. So it wouldn't surprise me if that was a tough matchup for them, because you can attack with as many guys as you want. If they're in a blue-based deck, they still get to flip blues every single time. So if you have 2 armor and they get 2 more every single time, like, you have to do anything you do under 4, you should consider to be damage you're not actually doing. And the Mix Masters of the world aren't getting in there for much more than 4. So so, like, I mean, even if you attack with 4 guys, like, you might only be doing 8 damage, like, and then they're gonna kill 1 back. Like, it's not a battle you're going to win.
Right.
So, like, you have to have more action phases and upgrade phases, and you just may not have them, given the fact that they have a 2-character deck.
Exactly.
And the fact that they can use Nemesis as a true blocker for Optimus, because, like, he can also take out these idiots, like, in one shot. Like, it can present a problem that way as well. But I do think I think you are favored if you can combine. So it just comes down to the makeup of the battle deck that the Prime-based decks are playing. Especially, like, how many espionages they're playing, or other discard type outlets that they may be playing.
Yeah, I think it's to that point. I think it's notable that he was playing 3 Enigmas, which I think is correct.
I think it's correct, also. Yeah.
Obviously, you're not winning the game on the back of the Constructicons themselves. You really do need to combine, and given the prevalence of Sentinels and espionage in general, you really need to make sure that you see it specifically in a very narrow window. Ideally, you want it defensively the turn before you combine, or you need them in bulk to make sure that you're not treasure hunting them away or something.
I don't care about that point. But I just that you can still get a repair counter out of it, even when you're combined. So.
Well, it's relevant also, and you get additional tower counters if for some odd reason you didn't make it there somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Same with Builder's Tools as well. So.
Right, yeah, Builder's Tools still has value after the fact. Especially, so the real scenario would be you get to 9 because you were going second and they were just one-shotting things left and right. You can Enigma Builder's Tool, get to 10, get in there.
Right.
Any other thoughts on Constructicons? There was some stuff in chat, so I was going to highlight that if we didn't have any other details to add.
No. pretty impressed that it did well, and I would say try this deck card for card before you start tweaking it to things that you want to try, just to understand why it's powerful before you think that this is a true deck that that has, how do I say it, the cards you draw are powerful as the cards you flip, as the colors you flip. So
that is a good point to bring up, because you're going to be pitching so many of them that if the text box isn't great, at worst it's give me one heal later on.
And so flipping it has more value when you have 6 characters that can attack than whatever the text box is. You honestly may, and a lot of times it's even more important to pitch the card. So its text box might as well just be if there was a blank, did absolutely had no chance of being used, 1.5 orange or double orange, you would run it over most of the cards in the deck, for example.
Yes, I could definitely see that. Yep. So I guess with that kind of closes it up for Constructicons. If we hop on over to chat real quick, had a few people dropping stuff in there, and I didn't want to intersperse them in this particular case. So Jackie was very excited because we brought Bulkhead up when we were talking about hypothetical stuff. That's one of her favorite characters. Dan was correcting me about photon bombs, specifically for our discussion regarding the touch. And apparently he played it directly against you. So I guess that's why you knew that John definitely played photon bombs. Then looks like W Gizmo was saying that he went 3-0 with the Too Tall Prime actually tonight. So congratulations on that. He was saying he one-shot Optimus Battlefield Legend with Scrapnel before he flipped to his other mode. Interesting. So, congratulations on the...
He one-shot Scrapnel with Optimus Battlefield Legend before he moved the others. That's what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. Before he flipped to his other... Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I was looking... for some reason, my brain read it backwards. I'm like, that doesn't... Yeah. I'm so confused right now. Yeah. It's been a very long, tiring week. So, forgive me, everybody. So, shout out to everybody that was participating in chat. Any other thoughts, Scott? Anything you wanted to plug or bring up since we're closing up at this stage?
Well, I mean, you and I both ran. I was fifth.
Well, yes. Okay, that's a good call. I don't have the list for that. I apologize, everybody. Do you have the list up on the site, Scott?
No, because we only try to put the top 4 decks.
We're only putting the good lists up there.
It was a good list. It's just bad.
Yeah, it just didn't perform well.
I performed fine. Had bad draws in the last matchup that mattered, and
I mean, doesn't that count as not performing well? If it didn't come together,
I didn't win a die roll all day, so I don't.
Oh, really? So what did you? What was your actual? What was your run through the event? Like, what'd you play against?
I mean, I'm only bringing this up because we talked about it last week, so I might as well at least give the conclusion as to what we did.
Of course.
I mean, I went 3-2. I was 3-0. I lost to John with a touch in 3 games, him winning die roll on the draw both times, and 1 on the play, which is exactly what we knew would happen, and is exactly what did happen, given smoothed out draws between the two of us. And then I lost to Stefan with Sentinels in the win and in match. My first hand was extremely action heavy, so I couldn't play more than 1 action a turn and had no upgrades. And my second hand was extremely upgrade heavy, and I couldn't play more than 1 upgrade a turn. And my first attack of the game flipped no oranges, despite playing majority orange deck.
That's bad. So, what was it, like Enigma Energon Slingshot or something?
No, it was like 3 whites. 3 cards that involved white and a blank.
Ouch.
So it took me 3 attacks to kill a 10 health Prowl, and that's why I lost. And that included direct damage as well. So it was just the way that the way to beat the wide decks is making them attack a guy more than once. Yeah. Because what matters in this game is how many resources it takes to kill the characters, and one of the major resources which I've talked about in the past, is how many attacks. So therefore, how many turns you have to win.
Absolutely.
Killing a guy. So if you have to take, it honestly should take anywhere from one. I've killed guys like Prow in one hit with a fully suited up Razor Claw, for example, suitably out of nowhere, quote unquote. given his ability,
right?
When it takes you 3 attacks to kill him, it just, you can't win. You just don't have enough the aggro control decks have enough power to potentially one-shot your guys. So if you're not getting value out of a single guy that you're actually attacking with, you're not going to win. And if the hand doesn't support you in that way, there's nothing you can do. Like, this game can be very dependent on what you can, and Sentinels is going to shred at least one of those actions from your hand, so it can be good to be flooded with upgrades, but not 8 of them in a row.
Yeah, you don't want to literally only be playing one card. I mean, that's what Sentinels wants, is that you're only playing one card a turn. You draw, you play a card. If your deck is doing that to begin with, you're not in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, I like the deck a lot. There's definitely changes I would make. I think the heavier. I think I needed weapons in the deck. I think I didn't play Ironhide's Blaster, and I probably should have. I think the argument could be made to make sure I include like one Scoundrel's Blaster, which I didn't play. Energon Slingshot was actually pretty good for me on the day. I played it because in our playtesting after our last podcast, like, scrap was a real problem, so I needed to have some way of dealing with that, and getting +1 attack in addition to getting the 1 damage was actually decent, and having such a small number of blues really didn't matter at all in the end. I was just kind of impressed by their flip abilities being active in the mode that you get into, and they actually had like a relevant effect. And this is something different than when I played Aerialbots, for example, where I kind of felt like it was just kind of better for them to be in the bot mode, and the abilities other than Silverbolt and I guess kind of like, I guess their modes were better to attack. Yeah, 3 of their modes are definitely better in bot mode, which is Air Raid, Alpha Bravo, and Silverbolt's kind of irrelevant. It's just you want to get that 1 damage in there.
Of course.
The other 2 in Fireflight and Skydive don't want to not be in plane mode, so their alt modes are better. But like on the Predacon side, you were pretty much getting value every single time you actually flip the guy outside of Headstrong, but I guess you could say making him somewhat combat relevant when attacking was a better value.
Silver linings.
Yes. But like, the Torox plan ability was very powerful. It gave you a lot of really powerful first turns when you had a double orange in your opening hand. The Razor Claw ability was really, really extremely powerful.
Of course.
The Dive Bomb ability was very powerful, especially when you set it up where they definitely were going to lose a card. The Rampage ability was actually decent. The heal was actually relevant multiple times in certain matches.
Yeah, that's one that may surprise
9
people.
One time. Yeah, I healed like 9 one time. It was pretty impressive. Who am I missing?
You said Headstrong, Tantrum, Dive Bomb, Razor Claw, and
Rampage, right?
That's 5.
Yeah, right. Yeah, honestly, Headstrong's clearly the worst character.
Well, yeah.
But I just think that like he doesn't even fit with the rest of the deck.
Well, I think they want the Brave guy to make sure that Razor Claw actually activates. Otherwise, he's clearly... So if they were the Stunticons, everybody's going to run into Razor Claw probably turn 1.
I guess so. But, it's really hard to take out a 9.
Yeah, you'd have to be an Optimus or something, which I'll admit, it is tough, but he's the guy you care the most about, I think.
I don't think against 2 tall, maybe against 3 wide, I would say.
Well,
I don't
yeah,
think
that's a good point.
You don't want to leave yourself exposed to 4 characters. It's different than Insecticons leaving yourself exposed to 3 characters.
Very true.
Especially when you're taking one of the major attackers. Mm-hmm. I would say, and I wrote this in my mistakes thing, 9 effective health seems low comparatively, but sometimes they can't do 9. Like, not everybody has 11 or 12. Like, when you have 9, it seems low, but, like, it was actually pretty decent. Again,
it's made up for in quantity.
Yeah. But, I mean, even if they survive a hit, if any one of them survives any single hit, I think the game's heavily more in your favor.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm not the greatest orange player in the world, so like I was still pretty impressed with how their power level allowed me to play to my weaknesses. So they had a lot of play, like you were actually able to make like a lot of cool moves with Razor Claw and like heal guys with Rampage, like just stuff that you wouldn't normally, like the plan one Torox. Like there was just a lot of plays that they had more playability to them, like to outplay people that I felt was on the table. So I was pretty impressed with them.
Yeah, they definitely, like you said, it allows you to do fun things too. Like it's a fun deck to play because there are decisions to be made. There are things to set up as opposed to, draw a card, play card, pick a guy, turn him sideways sort of thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned some changes. Was there anything else that you'd be looking for going forward? Do you think you're going to play it at a future event, or do you think that based on what the top 4 was here, if we get something similar, you're not even going to bother with it?
Oh no, I would play this because I think if properly built and properly played, out of the decks here that did top 4, the only one that I think it might be I played against the touch, and like I said, it depended on who went first. In playtesting, it had positive results against Aerialbots. And in playtesting, it had positive results against Sentinels with decent sized hands. I think you can shore up that matchup by changing certain things. I certainly played some underpowered actions in Zap, so that I would probably cut that, for example.
Oh, right.
And max out on my ability to get weapons every single turn. Like I would probably play something like at least one Swindled, which something like Constructicons can't afford to play, to have to give up the card disadvantage there. Whereas I think this deck could make good use of it.
Enigma into Swindled. It's going to happen.
Yep.
No, it won't. It'll never happen.
No.
You'll never have enough cards to do that.
No. So, yeah, it was good. I mean, I think it's a wide aggro deck that has play against everything, in my opinion. I don't know. I'd have to. It's probably weak to like a lot of the same. Like it could be weak to some of the aggro control strategies that are out there. I just felt like its Sentinel matchup wasn't that bad, but I could be wrong.
Well, I think you're right about it. The touch is going to be tough. Similar thing. Do you feel it would line up well against 3-wide of varying blue varieties?
As long as you're able to say, yeah.
As long as you're able to what?
As long as you're able to combine. It would come down to you combining. And I will say it's pretty weak to Grimlock as a character. I won my matchups against Dinobots and against the double Grimlock deck, but it was like seat of your pants the whole time. Like if they miss, like they need to misstep, which is and miss, which is essentially what happened in these situations. But like Grimlock remains a solid metagame answer to combiner decks.
Yep.
Especially orange ones. Like I was losing 2 characters to Steamroll or to Grimlock himself like multiple times. But like on the flip side, if you don't kill a guy, and he gets piled on by like 3 or 4 of your guys having weapons and upgrades and actions and things like that, like it's a bad time for them. Also, like he's probably only gonna get 1 attack, but if it kills 2 guys, you're probably just gonna lose. So you have to be very, very careful as to where you have to sequence your attacks extremely intelligent and make sure you put your damage on the right characters. Like I definitely lost the game where I put damage on like a guy to keep more guys alive, killing off a second character. But would just killed off the second Headstrong, then when I combined, I would have had a hell of a lot less damage on me because he only has 5 anyway. So just put all the overflow on it and then just let him die. And then when you, if you're able to combine, you'll basically all that overflow won't actually flow over to Predaking. And that was the situation that I learned. But I learned that by losing game 1 and then winning games 2 and 3. So just gotta, for these decks, I think, like, unless you can get a lot of playtesting, you have to learn on the fly. So
yeah, there's definitely a lot of situations exactly like you just described where it's, okay, what is the worthwhile sacrificial lamb, or how does sequencing work that 5-wide it doesn't seem like it would be that much different than playing these other builds that we've had from Wave 1 or other builds from Wave 2. But for me personally, getting my head around how a lot of the interplay works in various matchups has been a struggle. Like, I'm still actively learning a whole lot of things every time I pick up one of these decks, and how I should be sequencing things based on what I expect my opponent's going to do.
And I think the key is you have to know, as the player of the team, what the worst thing that your opponent can do to you is, and when they're making mistakes and where they're attacking.
Right.
Sometimes, obviously, like, if you have a brave character, they have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, there's other situations where, like, you need to turn their bad play to your advantage by having more characters.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely.
That's another thing. So, yeah. And you can do that by attacking them as well. So right. They're forced to attack another guy as well. So.
Yeah, there's definitely options. And that's where I was going with it, of trying to sacrifice the appropriate character. It's, okay, they're clearly going to get in and off somebody. Does it make sense to preserve some of Predacons' health for later? Does it make sense? No, maybe they'll whiff and I gotta, just take the chance. Or, how does this matchup play out? And that's where it's becoming complicated. And for me, trying to track all of that, because I can't stick with one deck, is becoming a challenge.
Yeah, I think there's one deck I want to try before I kind of there's 2 more decks I want to try before I kind of make a decision if it came down to that. I just want to shore up a different version of 3-wide Optimus, and then I want to see if the Stunticon build I have has any play. And then
I was about to ask, is it Constructicons and what's the other one? But then you surprised me.
No, I have no desire for Constructicons. I just don't. I'll let other people do it. I like them. I just don't. To me, they're just a 6-wide version of this deck, and I would rather just shore up this deck before I just went into that.
I got
that area,
For me, I do want to try Constructicons myself, but Stunticons are also something that I haven't given up on. They were the first combiner team, and then I put them down because I just couldn't find a way. But I want to circle back. That being said, I also have, and I'm not exaggerating, 9 or 12 other things that are probably really, really bad, but I got to get them out of my head because it's driving me nuts.
Yeah, there's certain decks I can put aside for now. At least there's definitely decks I know I'm not going to play. So
yeah,
I've at least been able to cross other ideas off my lists, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it.
Right. I'm not quite as decisive. I haven't accepted defeat on some of them, which I definitely should. I readily recognize that, but that's always been one of my weaknesses. Is I just don't want to. I have a hard time giving up on certain things. So
yeah, and then again, I do think that it's an article I'm working on, but I think it's a topic that stands. There are just so many decks that are playable right now that you are going to have a bad matchup against certain ones, and if your playtesting is going to be, if I can't beat this deck, it's not a viable deck, for example, that's going to happen regardless. But it's a continuum, not a rock paper scissors.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're going to lose to every version of X that sort of looks like that, because you could have certain cards that in one matchup swing the whole thing. Marksmanship is really bad against Sentinels, but it's really good everywhere else. So,
right.
Don't discount that because you keep drawing them, for example. So,
oh yeah, and it definitely rings true for me, because that is kind of the way I test a lot of things. Is I need to be able to beat certain decks, but that's also something that, and we've talked about this offline. A lot of other people have recognized it as well. because of the property-based nature of the game, or just, certain people like certain mechanics, you're not necessarily going to see a sea of bugs/primes. You're not necessarily going to have huge swaths of Predacons or Aerialbots or, whatever combiner, whatever the air quotes top decks are. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody's going to be playing them.
Right.
Because a lot of the decks, as you said, are maybe good enough that, okay, well, I like these guys more than those guys, and they're 85% of the way, 90% of the way. Yes, bugs would be better, but I could play with guys that I like. So you may end up getting that, and then that changes other matchups just because that team has access to whatever that thing happens to be, like you said.
Yeah, it's just I know you need to synergize your battle deck with characters, but and not any two battle decks should be the same. But they don't even play out the same depending on who the characters are. So
right, yeah. Changing any one of the moving parts drastically impacts the whole.
Yeah, and you should be moving them in concert with one another. But even if you don't, you could have a strength against one deck that has the exact same battle deck as another character lineup, simply because either the number of characters, the makeup of the characters, like the stats on the characters, things like that.
Exactly.
Again, the game continues to impress me with its the modal nature of it.
Absolutely. But it makes it a lot more complicated for deck building and testing, I will say.
And also, I will continue to say that play skill is at least 50% of every matchup. Because you only have so many actions to take in a turn, and if you waste them or play them incorrectly, you're going to be behind the 8 ball, because the game just simply doesn't last enough critical turns for you to make up for those mistakes.
Yeah,
so make sure
the quantity of plays, if you replace one with a mistake or error, the percentage wise, there was a big change there from good play to including the bad play. And that's what you even said it earlier. Something as simple as whiffing on an attack, which, yes, everybody could chalk it up to, I didn't flip whatever I needed, but could you have played or sequenced something differently to influence that attack 2 turns ago, kind of thing, to set you up so that you didn't have to sink another one into that headstrong or another one into whatever. And then that went on to cause you to lose the game.
Yeah.
So I guess unless you had anything else you wanted to, I guess we'll do the whole end cap again. Anything else you wanted to plug aside from, I guess, what we had just played? I know there are a bunch of future events coming up. Anything else important for Vector Sigma coming up? What do you got for us?
No, coverage of this event will be up there for the next few weeks. Matches. I think we successfully recorded all but one match, including the top 4 match, because the top 2 split, didn't actually play it out. So there'll be definitely gameplay footage of this event that'll be up there, and due to the variety of decks and the quality of players, I think, that were involved, I would highly recommend that people check those out, and use them as teaching tools for yourself to get some of your own playtesting out of the way. So you can always hit us up if you have questions. It's easiest to hit me up through the contact page if you want to email me, or you can just hit me up on Facebook in a personal message. I'm usually responsive to those. So I'm available in various ways, so feel free to hit me up.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely reach out to us if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Again, we're always looking to try and include either from chat or general mailbag questions if you have anything that you want us to make sure we cover. Obviously, next week we're probably going to be talking about the Wave 3 announcements, the organized play stuff, all those other things. Maybe we'll get lucky. There'll be a couple previews. We'll have stuff along those lines. We'll see how it goes. Again, thank you to everybody that was watching live and participating in chat. Congratulations to everybody that top 4'd at our recent event. And tune in next time for more Random's Thoughts.